first live edition of Elk Talk. And thanks to the great folks at Bowtech, at Leupold, and the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, we've come up with this idea that every Wednesday, same time, we're going to be taking your questions, and I'm going to be doing my best to answer them. But I have to preface it by saying I am not an elk expert. I'm just one of those lucky guys who gets to go on 6 to 8 elk hunts a year, either my hunts or with friends, in all kinds of different places, all kinds of different terrain and season types. And it's mostly been an experience of trial and error for me, with a lot of error. So hopefully I'm smart enough I won't make the same mistake all the time. When I give an answer, it's going to be based on 25 years of chasing elk. There are no perfect answers, but that's the idea, is to share information. I'll do my best. From a kind of a how it's laid out standpoint, if you see me looking over here, we've got Michael over here. He's taking all your questions, and I got to read them off a monitor there. And behind the camera there, if someone's giving me the, hey, stop, Randy, you're making a fool of yourself, it's Marcus, the production guy back there. So with this, I've got 30 minutes. I'm going to try to get through as many questions as possible. Sometimes your questions will require a really lengthy answer, and it might be something that we've already talked about on a YouTube episode. So we might refer to go watch us on our YouTube channel. The other thing you're going to see that most of the time when I answer a question, it comes down to all that I talk about with elk goes to the 5 calendar periods of elk hunting. We hunt elk in 5 calendar periods: early season, pre-rut, peak rut, post-rut, late season. The elk have different needs in every one of those 5 calendar periods, and you're going to find them in different places because they go to different places to satisfy their needs. So if I keep referring back to it, that's the reason why. It is that basic, that fundamental to everything you're going to do when it comes to public land elk hunting. So with that, Michael's already got some questions queued up here. What's the best time of year to kill a mature bull elk on public land? Anytime you have a tag is a good time. But for me, if I'm going to go and chase mature bull elk, it's going to be in one of 2 periods. Just before the peak of the rut, say probably September 8th through the 15th. The bulls have not yet sorted out who's the king, who's the big bad dog. So there's still an opportunity to get one of the mature bulls before he's got a big herd of cows. The other time for me is what I call late season. And for me, late season is anytime November 1st and after. It just is where mature bulls have a tendency to congregate in what I call sanctuary areas. And year after year, they go to the same places. And those late season hunts, a lot of places that have general seasons have November seasons. To me, those are places or times when you have a really good chance of finding a mature bull on public land. So, all right. Ooh, what do you do when bulls are not bugling during a hunt? This applies mostly to pre-rut, peak rut, and possibly a little bit of the post-rut. For me, I keep moving and moving and moving. The amount of terrain that I will cover in archery season is a lot. Last year I was doing an archery hunt with Corey Jacobson in New Mexico. In 7 days, we calculated, according to Corey's GPS, we had walked 80 some miles. That's how much we're moving to find where the elk are. The bulls are moving to wherever the cows are, and the cows are going to be where the good feed is. And sometimes they're very selective. What looks like good feed to us isn't necessarily good feed to a cow elk. So in the peak rut, even the pre-rut or slightly after the peak rut, you want to focus on food sources because the cows are going to be on the food and the bulls are looking for the cows. So, wow. I don't know how many we're going to get through in 30 minutes here. How many coolers do I use when transporting a boned out cow elk? So this is specific to a cow elk, and what size of coolers. So for me, I want to have lots of ice. I bring 1 cooler, and we've done a YouTube clip on this where all I bring in 1 cooler is ice. I never open it. It's frozen milk jugs so that I don't have water melting and spilling all over. When I get that elk boned out, if it's a bull elk, I try to spread that elk over 3 coolers. I usually have two 65 quart coolers and an 85 quart cooler. And I could probably fit it in less space than that, but I want to have as much space as possible for those frozen milk jugs or block ice or whatever I'm going to use as my cooling agent. Also, make sure you never put warm meat inside a cooler. If you think about this hind quarter, once you bone it out, it's this big mass of warm meat. Way down inside there, there's still a lot of heat. Hang that thing overnight. Let the temperature of the meat get to the ambient air temperature. Then, once it's cool, then put it in a cooler. You put warm meat in a cooler, you don't have enough ice to get that meat, that big mass in the middle of it. You don't have enough ice to get that cool before it'll spoil. So for me, 3 coolers, usually 1 cooler just for ice and 3 coolers for meat. Oh, let's see. For a first-time public land hunter and first-time elk hunter, any specific advice? Yeah, I do. It's all about the mental frustration of it. I tell people I was the worst elk hunter that ever walked. I'd made every mistake possible, but I didn't give up. Set your expectation for public land elk that it's never going to be easy. And for the times when it is easy, it's like, oh, gee, this is easier than I thought. As far as specifics, it's a really broad question. I approach it as, what is the season date? So if my season date in a lot of the western states, let's say rifle seasons are late October, well, that's post-rut. That's the hardest time there is to kill a bull elk on public land, is post-rut. Well, in post-rut, the elk, the bull elk that we're chasing, are looking to get through a hunting season. So they're going into these ugly, nasty areas. You find them in the sanctuary locations. So for me, I look at the process of, what's the calendar period I'm hunting? What are the needs the elk have in that calendar period? And I know they're going to be in locations where they can satisfy those needs with the least amount of exposure to hunters. It's just how they get older. So I know it's a generic question, but or a generic answer, but it was a pretty generic question and hard to answer in a short period of time. If you had an archery tag for Colorado, would you go late August or early September? This is my wife and my current dilemma. The answer is yes. I would go anytime. I would probably try to go, because the Colorado elk season runs into later September. Maybe that's not a possibility for you, but I'd go as late into September as I can. You're still going to have the full depth of the rut. Early or late August, you're not going to have much rut activity. If there's 2 of you hunting and you shoot 1 elk and you want to keep hunting to try fill the other tag, your temperatures are probably going to be a little bit cooler in late September. So given the whole period of the Colorado archery season, I'm going to go the last week of season rather than the first week. So how long do you hang elk meat out in the field? That's a good question, because let's face it, we hunt elk because we want to eat elk. And if you leave that elk out in really warm temperatures, you got a problem. So for me, obviously it's temperature dependent. But even in warm weather, it's surprising if you get good synthetic game bags that allow heat and moisture transfer to occur quickly. You hang it in the shade, and you hang it in a place where you will get a lot of wind. I've hung meat in pretty warm temperatures and still had no problem after 3 days. If it's really warm after 3 days, I'm starting to figure out, how am I going to get that elk to where it's going to be processed. November hunts, when it's cold, you can get by with a lot in those periods of time. All right, what is my opinion about a full moon or hot weather affecting the rut? Well, because of our TV show and our platforms, I don't have the luxury of saying, oh, it's full moon, I'm not going to hunt, or it's hot weather, I'm not going to hunt. I have to hunt no matter the moon phase, no matter the weather. For me, I've really not found any influence that the full moon has. If you think about how elk rut, they have this peak because they have a set gestation period in the cows, and they have to drop those calves at a certain time in late May, early June. They don't care about the full moon. Yeah, they might do more of their rutting at night, so we don't see them as much. especially in hot weather, that weather is really a determining factor about how active they are during the day versus the night. The rut's still going on. It's just a matter of whether or not it's happening during the day while we're out there hunting, or whether it's mostly happening at night. All right, this one's from Matt. If you are elk hunting and you're going to glass with binos on a tripod, would you use 10 power or 12 power, and why? If I'm strictly in a glassing situation and I'm going to be bringing a big pair of binoculars, I'm going to try to bring 15 power. Leupold has a new 15 by 56 binocular that I've been using, and it's amazing how much a 15 power binocular on a tripod benefits your glassing. Now, if this is the same binos you're going to be using that you carry around your neck, and when you're walking through the woods or you're hiking the trails, you're going to be using those, I'm going with 8 or 10s versus 10 or 12s. And whether I'm doing 8s or 10s depends on how much cover and how far away I think I'm going to be glassing. So let's see. You never seem to talk about cooking elk. How about a couple simple go-to recipes? Really, we don't talk about cooking it enough. We're going to have to fix that. We eat a lot of elk when we're out in the field. We eat a lot of when we go on 2-3 week road trips, we're getting hungry for good, high quality protein. So if we shoot an elk or an antelope, a deer, whatever, sometimes we'll cook it right in camp. And the simplest camp recipes that I have is you can use a multitude of marinade mixes. I just use a really simple marinade, even if it's the Lowry's or whatever you got to get at the store. I marinate for 3, 4, 5 hours, and then I cook really slow on a grill. I know that's not like a super special recipe. The other thing, I love roasts. And with roast, I put them in some sort of seasoning with a little bit of water. And it just depends on how I feel that day. Sometimes I put onions and carrots, and you never know what I'm going to put in there. So there's no science to that, but maybe that's a good point that we need to start talking about more recipes. Earlier, before we went live, Chef Collins was live on the Bowtech channel. That was a really good one. They cooked a venison backstrap. All right, Randy, how do you locate where trailheads are? I'm a flatlander, but when you go to a new location, what resources do you use to find all the trailheads? There's a multitude of resources you can use. If you're on Forest Service lands, Forest Service always has a travel management map that shows what roads are open, what trails are open, if they're closed permanently, seasonally, and where the trailheads are. You hear me talk about a system I use all the time called Onyx Maps. Onyx Maps on their Hunt app, it's a smartphone app, or on their web map system, have all those trailheads in there. Usually you're going to need a map, whether it's a BLM or Forest Service map, or you just go with something like Onyx Maps. All right, for our new or young hunters, what's your #1 safety go-to tip that I can offer? Safety is super important. We never take safety for granted in our production. In fact, some of you are surprised that we don't shoot certain animals that are out there. The reason we don't have a quick get ready and shoot strategy is we do not let any hunter carry a round in the chamber. Yes, in the magazine, never in the chamber. And I see people do it all the time. There is no elk in the world that is worth carrying a live round in the chamber and relying on a mechanical device like a safety. That's how we do it. We have chaos going on when we see an animal. We got camera guys moving around. We might have a guest hunter, whatever. We are never going to carry a live round in the chamber, ever. You can't have an accidental discharge. You can't have an injury if you don't have a live round in the chamber. So, let's see. How much time do you spend scouting in the field compared to studying a map of a new area? That depends. Depends on my calendar. Usually, we start this time of year. We're getting notified. Hey, you drew this tag or you drew that tag. So I will spend my whole summer what I call desk scouting and e-scouting. We did a whole YouTube series on that. You can go out to the Randy Newberg Hunter YouTube channel and find all that. But if I can, I've usually got 5 days to sort it out, figure it out, and then pack it out. And for me, I will drop the last day of hunting for an extra day of scouting at the beginning. Scouting to me is about eliminating territory. I can eliminate more terrain, more of the spots I have on my map in one day of scouting than it's how I approach it. I go to a place, I try to have 10 spots on my map. I try to have 2 spots for each of the 5 days. But I might cover 2, 3, 4 of those spots the first day, move and cover 2, 3, 4 of them the next day. By the time the second or third day is done, I've eliminated most of the unproductive spots, and now just focusing on the places where I've seen elk, I've seen their sign, I know they are there. So I don't get as much time because of my calendar to spend field scouting as I do desk scouting. And to that point, a lot of you will have an October or November tag, and you will come out in July or August to scout. And it'll give you some benefit of knowing where the roads and trails are, how the terrain lays out. But understand that elk in July and August, when you're out here scouting, they're going to be in completely different places in October or November. So it's okay to come and scout to learn the lay of the land, learn the roads, the trails, but don't make that your plan if your hunt is 2-3 months away. Oh, what's the smallest caliber you would use elk hunting? For me, probably one of the 25 calibers is as low as I would go. You've seen me hunt with 7mm, 08. My preferred are the 30 calibers. You ask that, you're going to get a million questions from a million people. The number one thing is know how to use your rifle. Know what your bullet does. Use high quality bullets and practice. Make good shots as far as shot placement. And the same goes for archery. I mean, I'm talking about rifle, but for archery, it's the same thing. Shot placement, accuracy, and quality equipment goes a mile, goes more than a mile. That's what's going to do it for you. So, Steve from Oregon. Why don't you have any shows about Oregon hunts? There's also someone asking the same thing about Idaho. Part of it is our calendar and when we have to apply for tags. Oregon, Idaho are later in the application process compared to Arizona and Wyoming, Utah, Nevada, a few others. But also we look at where is a good opportunity for the average person who's a traveling hunter to go and hunt. Oregon and Idaho are good locations, good opportunity hunts. For the non-resident hunter that we normally try to depict what their opportunity is, Oregon is expensive and a very small percentage of the tags get allocated to non-residents, which I completely understand. If I was a resident, that's how I'd want it too. But that's kind of why Oregon seldom makes it on our list. That said, my number one bucket item list right now that I've never done before is Roosevelt elk. So hopefully in the next year or two, you won't have to ask the question about Oregon. So how do you find elk/bulls when glassing is not an option due to timber and lack of vantage points? I go to someplace else. I don't hunt big expanses of dark timber. I don't hunt big flat areas. Maybe in the rut I will, because then it's you're listening and it's a vocal hunt. But if it's anything other than the rut, I'm going and I'm hunting broken areas, I'm hunting burns, I'm hunting topography that creates edge areas, avalanche chutes, and I'm going to places where I can get to some sort of elevation, especially October, November, and December, because those are key glassing periods. I'm not going to waste my time in dark timber. I can't see anything. I got to get to some place that's a vantage point where I can glass that basin, that ridge, down in that cut. I want to be able to glass 4, 5, 6 likely locations from one glassing vantage. So that might not be the answer you're expecting, but if that's what it looks like, I just cross that off my map and say, this is not a place to find a lot of elk. If a unit in Arizona requires 7 points now to draw, how many points will it likely be in 7 years with point creep factored in? That's a good question. Who knows? I wish I could answer that, but you really don't know. Depends on how many people keep applying for Arizona. Do they have to cut back tags because of drought or because of something else? Will they change their bonus point system? You never know. One thing you do know about all these western states and their elaborate schemes of bonus point systems, what you start applying for today, give it 10 years, they're going to tweak and alter that system, and it's going to be slightly different than what you thought you were buying. So, all right. What bow am I shooting this year? Well, it's interesting that you say that, because right here behind me is my bow for this year. See if I can tip everything over. This is the new Rain 7 by Bowtech. They call it the Smart Bow. And you'll see I've got it outfitted with the same stuff I've had for years. Got the black gold sight, tight spot quiver, ripcord fall-away rest. And I've been shooting Bowtech bows for, trying to remember how long, a long time. So that's what I'll be shooting this year. I can assure you that my equipment is never the weak link in the equation. I am always the weak link in the equation. No matter how hard I practice, whether it's with rifle, with bow, I've never had an equipment problem. It's always been operator error. So once elk are spooked from an area, do you forget that area, or will the elk return during the hunting season? It depends which season. When you say hunting season, if you spook them in the rut, they're moving a lot. They're pushing cows. They're probably going to be back in there. If it's one of those sanctuary periods of, starting from, let's say, 1st of November to December, once you bump them, they're going to go find a different sanctuary. The odds are they're not coming back there. In October, same rule applies for the most part. The last half of October, if you bump them, they're going to find someplace else. That's been my experience. Since I only have 5 days on any hunt, regardless whether it's a 10-day season or an 8-day season, I only have 5 days. If I bump them, I better take advantage of that opportunity. That's why I glass a lot. I don't want to just plow in there and be bumping elk. I want to sit there and look and glass and see where they're at. Once I find them, I might not be able to get to them that evening before dark. But the next morning, I'm going in the daylight or in the dark, and when daylight comes, I'm going to be there and I'm going to kill that bull. The same could apply where, all right, I saw them in the morning. I can't get there that morning before they go to bed. I'm going to use the daylight hour to get in a shooting position, and I'm killing that bull in the last half hour of daylight. Have you noticed the rut coming in later and later as years pass in Colorado? We go Labor Day week, and every year, and it seems like it's getting later in the week each year. I can't say that I do notice it, because I'm usually somewhere else. I'm usually not in Colorado during the rut. I'm usually in Montana. Last year I was in New Mexico. This year I'm going to be in Wyoming and Montana. So I wish I could answer the question, but I really haven't noticed it in the places I do hunt. How many miles do you hike in a 5-day elk hunt? I think I kind of referred to that earlier when I talked about hunting in New Mexico with Corey Jacobson. But for us, for these public land hunts, we are averaging anywhere from 8 to 12 miles a day. That's a lot of hiking. That's a lot of walking. But that is where the mature bulls get pushed. And if you go and read anything that I write about elk hunting, listen to any of my seminars, follow some of the stuff on our Facebook pages or our YouTube channel, you will see I'm always talking about how do I get as far as possible from motorized roads and motorized trails. That's not a political statement on motorized travel. That's just a fact that all the research shows that elk try to be at least a mile away from those places. That means we got to do a lot of hiking. Which firearm season is your favorite in New Mexico? Yes, all of them. There's not a bad firearm season in New Mexico. But like pretty much all places, I'd prefer to go in the first rifle season in New Mexico if I was given my chance. Oh, I was wondering how long you spend in one area. Do you spend half a day hiking and then going back to camp? Assuming you see no bulls or hear no bugles, do you abandon that? So when I commit to an area for a day, I'm in there for the whole day. I, I put places on my map to say, all right, if I go into this basin or this drainage, I've got 5, 6 spots that I know are good, and I'm staying in there. I'm going in way before the sun comes up. If you leave the truck at prime light, by the time you get back to where the elk are, it's too late. They're already in their beds. You have to be comfortable navigating and leaving in the dark, getting there before the sun comes up. Spend the whole day in that basin, and it can be boring as can be. In the late season, if it's really cold, I build a fire. And I stay there until the absolute end of shooting light, and I walk back out in the dark. And if I don't see anything, then I'll go to another basin where I have 5 or 6 spots in mind. Oh, let's see. Fixed or mechanical broadheads for elk hunting? You ask a million people, you'll probably get 1.5 million answers to this. But for me, I'm a fixed broadhead guy for elk. They're big, they're tough. You think about just the physics of how a fixed blade works versus an expandable. If possible, I want a hole through each side. I want 2 blood holes rather than 1. It's easier to trail. And part of it is I've grew up, ever since I started archery, I've been using fixed blades. So that's what I use. What is the #1 lesson I have ever learned while hunting elk? Elk will teach you a lot, I can tell you that. It's hard to give one lesson. It kind of goes back to an answer I gave earlier. Public land elk hunting is all about the mindset. I know a lot of people who give up on public land elk hunting because it's way harder than they expected. To me, public land elk hunting has taught me that you just got to go and go and go and go. And those of you watching right now, how many times have you been just about ready to give up? You're kind of losing focus, you're not paying attention, and boom, there's the bull. You hear him or you see him. To me, it's always having something that mentally makes me think over the next ridge, around the next corner in the trail. Whatever it is, we're going to have success today. To me, it's all mental. How much time do you spend scouting for a hunt that is far from home? We touched on scouting earlier. To me, I scout as much as my calendar allows. And for me, a lot of that scouting is going to be calling biologists, calling agency people, range managers, researching what the fire history has been in that area, learning what I'll use an example. Colorado has this interactive map that their Parks and Wildlife has put together. It's got where the summer range is, where the winter range is, where the migration corridors are. And I say, all right, what's my season date? And are they going to be closer to the summer range? Are they going to be closer to the winter range? Are they in that transition zone? And then I start doing a lot of desk scouting in those areas. So I spend hours and hours, days and days desk scouting because my calendar doesn't let me do boots on the ground scouting. Why don't I do more archery hunts? I do as many as our calendar will allow. I do just about every year I have an archery mule deer hunt. Every year pretty much I always have an archery elk hunt or 2. I'd like to do even more of them, but the period of time, the window in which you have available to do those, at least in the elk world, is pretty much September. You'll see this year coming on TV, I did an archery coos deer hunt in Arizona. Ton of fun. After that, everybody's going to Arizona to archery coos deer hunt after that episode airs. Have you ever hunted up there in northern British Columbia, Canada? I haven't, unfortunately. As you know, our show is all self-guided hunting, and in Canada, for just about all species, not all, but most, you need to hire a guide or an outfitter, and so it just has never fit the style and format that we've selected to do for our TV show. So, what else we got here? Do you believe in scouting in the spring and summertime, even though the elk might not be in that spot in hunting season? I answered that kind of touched on it a little earlier. The answer is probably not. If I've only got 2 or 3 days of scouting, I want to come and scout as close to my season date as I can. Yeah, if I'm going out on a trip out west or to some other state and I got a tag, I might take an afternoon and go learn the roads and the landscape, and okay, I'm going to camp here. But as far as my scouting for purposes of locating elk and where they're going to be in my season, I want to make that as close as possible to the time when I'm going to be hunting. So, holy cow, we already blew through 30 minutes. Uh-oh. We didn't get through, I'm sorry folks, we didn't get through hardly a small portion of the questions. Dang it. But anyhow, I want to thank you all for watching. I want to thank Bowtech, Leupold, and the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation for making this possible. This is kind of a fly by the seat of our pants. I'm accustomed to TV where you film something and 10 months later, it gets aired. This is, we're filming it and less than 10 seconds later, it's getting aired. But what we do want, we want your feedback, what you thought of this. We want your questions. We hope you'll share this event every Wednesday night. Let all your friends and family and people you hunt with, let them know about it. We're talking with Bowtech and Elk Foundation and Leupold. We're trying to come up with some really cool packages, prizes, and giveaways for this event. But mostly we want to engage with you and do our best to answer questions, because I get so many emails, private messages, Facebook messages. I can't get to them all. And so what we're trying to do is find a format where maybe other people who have the same question can also get an answer for this. So anyhow, thanks for helping, guys. Thanks for everyone for watching, and we'll see you next week.